broadcast network, AfterBuzz TV. Over 20 million weekly downloads in over 150 countries, and your number one source for after-show entertainment. AfterBuzz TV, the destination for TV superfans. Producing aftershows for over 300 of your favorite TV shows. Interviewing celebrities and showrunners. And bringing you behind-the-scenes exclusives. All thanks to E! Entertainment's Maria Menounos, producer Kevin Undergaro, and internet leader Akamai. Now, let the buzz begin!
So anyway, that's how they're going to finish up episodes 8 and 9.
Oh, okay.
It's going to be really cool.
It's very interesting.
Yeah, you know.
Welcome, everyone, to the UFC After Show here on AfterBuzz TV, your After Show network. This song is badass, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Master of Puppets by the...
timeless.
Metallica. I love it.
And Yamis Hetfalade. Sure. And Lars Ulrich, of course.
Okay, sure. But here on your UFC After Show that we're always here covering the big events, which is what we have to say now, we are covering the Fox UFC show from last night. Main event for the lightweight title, Rafael Dos Anjos versus Donald Cerrone.
Last show of the season, huh?
Last
of the year, rather.
Last show of the year, officially last show of the year. Mm-hmm. As we end this, I guess you should say, newsworthy 2015.
Yeah.
We'll be going over that in a little bit.
A lot of adjectives for 2015.
Why don't you guys introduce yourselves? Because I like to introduce my co-hosts first before I introduce myself.
You like to, or you want us to do it?
No, I want you guys to introduce yourselves, and then I can introduce myself, because I'm not selfish like our past host.
True indeed. You're not. And they were.
Thank you for joining us, and I am Lethal Laura.
She's the LL to my cool J, JTan716, all over your internet.
And I am George Hermoza, and you can follow me on the Twitter machine at ghermoza, GHERMOZA. I'm also on Instagram, but Twitter, Instagram, as we break down this fun night full of fights.
Yeah.
Fun night
this one
full
paid
of fights.
off, huh? UFC on Fox 17.
From Orlando, Florida.
Mm-hmm.
First time they were there, and feels like a little while.
Yeah, gosh, I'm not sure when it was the last time, but I know that they outdid... they mentioned not doing their box office and I believe attendance as well.
Yeah, I mean, Florida's kind of a big fight kind of state. You got American Top Team there, the Blackzilians. Mm-hmm. Kind of surprised they don't maybe do more fights from Florida. I mean, I guess you can say the same about California too. A lot of fight camps out here, but we only get one fight every now and then.
There's
UFC, that is. I know there's a lot of RFA.
I was going to say, yeah.
UFMMA.
There's not in Florida yet.
Okay.
Yet. Of course, there is a ton of regional MMA in both of those states and just about anywhere. But I think you really hit huge popularity, especially when you take this when the UFC goes to, I'm going to say, in kind of B-level towns. And I don't mean to disparage anything, but towns that don't already have their own entertainment, that's a big thing in terms of where you go and where your big box office is going to be, because there's less stuff to do in particular places. So when something does come to town, especially something as exciting as the UFC, boom.
Everybody gets excited.
Exactly.
That's true.
Has that much more impact.
I mean, I guess you can say in some ways history was made last night, but not as much as maybe the past two pay-per-views. I mean, I guess you can say history for Rafael, since he successfully defended his, I guess I want to say newly crowned, since this was his first title defense against Donald Cerrone. And what I thought was a much, on my part at least, much anticipated fight. Were you guys looking forward to this fight as much as maybe other fights from the last month or two?
Yeah, I certainly was.
Definitely looking for this one. Big letdown of how it actually went down, but... it was a kind of a shocker.
Yeah. Fast finish, of course, Rafael Dos Anjos winning by TKO in the first, minute 06. It was almost like Cowboy didn't really kind of get going there, which was surprising. Granted, even he himself has talked about being a slow starter, but you would expect for a title match that has been, this is probably, in my opinion, been from the Donald Cerrone story, one of the more anticipated title matches in terms of the populace, the fans, saying, "Here's the guy that really deserves." Yeah. This has been a slow burn to the title match, so I was expecting him to kind of come out a little bit stronger and faster. And the flurries that they did trade were pretty hard for sure, but Dos Anjos really capitalized on that body kick there.
One of the things that crossed my mind throughout, after the fight was that this is probably the longest or one of the longest time frames that Cerrone hasn't fought. And I really, because I think he was inactive for, I don't want to say inactive, but hasn't had an official fight in around 7 months. Here's a guy who loves to fight for many different reasons, whether it's the paycheck, whether it's the adrenaline, whether it's, just the love for it. And I really think that's something that gets him going. Do you think I guess you can say 7 months time off or without a fight kind of affected him in some ways?
Good question. I don't know.
You know what? I don't think so. I think from the first fight that they had, he's been on a roll after that. Just fighting back and forth, back to back actually. And I think, this fight shows that anything can happen in MMA.
Yeah.
It's just, sometimes there's a lucky shot that you get caught, and I don't think he was able to, to kind of, get better from that shot. So I think he just got caught off.
I'm just checking his stats here. His last loss was to Rafael Dos Anjos, of course. August 2013, Fight Night 27. What is this one? I think this was a fight. No, it's not officially a fight night, but I mean, we're up into like near 80, late 70s. So in that time, I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 matches.
Yeah, 8 in a row.
Yeah, 8 in a row.
And mind you, not just 8 guys. I mean, this is Eddie Alvarez, Benson Henderson, Edson Barboza, Evan Dunham, all these Jim guys, Miller. Miles Jury. These guys are like, especially somebody like Eddie Alvarez and Benson Henderson, former champions in their own respective, organizations, whether it's Bellator or, in the UFC. And here's, Donald Cerrone pretty much officially unanimously beating these guys. So Cerrone is not an easy guy to beat. So for the way that Dos Anjos beat him, so I guess you can say easily.
What do you think it was?
I think it was the inactivity, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Here's a guy who fights, and I'm trying to count in my head as well as, doing this hosting thing. The longest time he's been off. So, for example, before May, he was off 4 months. Before that fight, it was like 2 weeks. It was like a 2-week turnaround.
I was looking at that as well.
3 months, 2 months,
matches.
3 months, 3 months, 2 months. I mean, here's a guy who kind of stays active all the time.
2 years. Yeah, what? It's been 2 years, maybe. Yeah, about 2.5 years, 8 matches.
So I really do think that the longer he waits in between fights, I mean, maybe the more he thinks about it. And the more he thinks about it, maybe the more it might hurt him. Here's a guy who kind of lives off just fighting. And I really do think the inactivity gave him more time to think about it and more time to prepare instead of kind of just going with your instinct. That's just my opinion, of course.
You think that he got in his own head then?
Absolutely.
Really?
Yeah. Again, I don't know, maybe you watched the post-fight conference. Any words from Cerrone at all about maybe what was in his head?
You know what? I didn't see any interviews from him after.
Yeah, not yet. I caught part of the post-fight, but if he was there, he wasn't there in the first part that I watched. I want to say I saw some some line that he just typical no excuses, I got beat, that kind of thing. But not a whole lot of backstory or response from him yet that I've seen online, at least.
I mean, with that said, I don't want to take away anything from Dos Anjos as well. I believe like about a year ago, I had this guy kind of pegged at one of the guys to watch, not only in 2015, but I think I had him for one of my top fighters for 2014. And here's a guy who's won 5 in a row against equally high-level opponents: Nate Diaz, Anthony Pettis, of course, for the belt, Benson Henderson, of course, Donald Cerrone. Nothing taken away from this guy. This guy is truly deserves to be at the top of the division. Do you guys see it more as this guy just came in a whole different Dos Anjos? Like, you think he's maybe on a mission to be maybe included in the same breath as maybe a Demetrius Johnson or some of the other champions?
I think the time off obviously did him well. He was dealing with surgery and coming back, healing properly. But he was as fierce here as he was in the Nate Diaz fight. I think the Anthony Pettis, he was just dominant. No, I think he's just that damn good, quite frankly. And now is his time, and he came in. I think that I really feel that, I mean, there's some kind of it's almost a cousin in some ways to the McGregor Aldo fight, that the match. This was one of those instances. 9 times out of 10, the match goes longer, and it's far more competitive between the two of them. But I think a big part of it really was that kick to the body that Cerrone took. Stunned him, and Dos Anjos is fast enough and sharp enough to capitalize on that with the rest of the punches. That led to the demise, kind of. My thoughts.
I think the same.
Yeah,
I think that. No, actually, I think. Dos Anjos was, just capitalized, like you said, and he didn't let go. Like, he didn't back off, and he just kept going and going and going until he got that. And he actually looked at the ref, like, "Hey,
Herb,
you gonna stop it or what?"
I think if it wasn't a title fight, I think that fight would have been stopped. A little bit, maybe 5 punches before.
Yes, when he was against the fence. That's what I was kind of reading about that.
Yeah, I thought they were gonna stop it when he was still standing. But kudos to these refs, because it's like these are. It kind of means a little bit more when it is for a title. It's like you never want a premature stoppage, anyways. But let alone for a belt. I mean, that's kind of, especially with the whole Reebok deal, you get more money in it. So it is kind of a lot of people's livelihood involved. I mean, what's next for both guys? Is it something? Do you think Cerrone is going to maybe fight back into the scene, or do you think maybe he's just going to be one of those guys that maybe like a Junior Dos Santos, where who we'll get into next, where he's going to be fine just fighting every 3-4 months and not really for a belt.
Him coming back. I don't think that
definitely.
This is the end of him.
I think this is just that right shot at the right time.
Yeah,
and he just got caught, and he couldn't get from that. So.
The top five or six that we're looking at here: Anthony Pettis, Donald Cerrone, Khabib Nurmagomedov. Eddie Alvarez.
By the way, is he what's his deal? I know he keeps getting hurt. I know there was talks of retirement, maybe.
And he came out and refuted that, didn't he?
Okay, I don't know.
I think, I believe. I haven't paid attention too much to it. It's kind of like, well, Habib will pop up whenever Habib pops up.
Yeah?
There is kind of there's...
Who holds a victory over Rafael Dos Anjos?
Yeah.
Yes.
He's been dealing with injuries now that you mention it, and I do remember. Yeah, it's kind of one after the other, and which led to the conversation about AKA possibly really needing to second guess their training methods, right? I think that I'm sure we'll see him back. Cerrone, you put Cerrone up against Eddie Alvarez again, Tony Ferguson. Although I think you probably talk about Tony Edson, man. I mean, maybe that's maybe you talk about that next. That could be fun. Certainly a fun match, right?
Maybe. Definitely Ferguson has yet to disappoint on the entertainment department.
Cerrone versus Michael Johnson, who also came up short this night. But
we can talk about that fight right now. I mean, might as well. It's in the same division. You had number 6 Michael Johnson against number 15 Nate Diaz. Totally unexpected as far as what the result and the way that this fight turned out.
Yeah.
I didn't think that Nate Diaz was going to be so dominant. I kind of want to hear your thoughts, as guys, too, about what do you guys think of this whole Nate Diaz? Is it a resurgence? Is it just maybe he just got Michael Johnson's number?
I think Nate is just, he sees some type of money now that the whole McGregor thing is, what's going on, and I think he smells it, and I think he wants to show up when he wants to show up, I guess. Last time he didn't show up at all, but I think he just kind of wanted to prove a point this time around, like,
a motivated Diaz brother is a really dangerous Diaz brother.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
There was a lot of drama going on with his contract and his the way that he felt the UFC was treating him a year ago when they kind of put him on ice, or maybe he just stepped out, depending on what you want to how you want to interpret the situation. But he was coming back. The Diaz brothers are motivated, it seems, by, if nothing else, by especially making a point, and
we've seen that money in some ways doesn't even matter to, at least to Nick, who's who's literally been in main event title fights and
Right.
doesn't show up to press conferences, so it's like, is it money that motivates him, or is it fighting, or we don't know. It's a different thing every time.
They certainly live to the beat of their own drummer, if you will. I've heard stories about their houses. They'll have a big house, but in there is nothing but jiu-jitsu match laid out, and protein powder and stuff. And that they're very different people on camera versus off camera. That when you're hanging out with them, obviously in the right group, they're very affable and engaging, and big smiles and laughing and stuff like that. But as soon as you hoist a camera up, they shut down, and it's different.
Nick Diaz, I know we're talking about Nate, but both of them in general, they both seem very like standoffish. Like, you don't want to approach them. Like,
Right.
you don't know when they're going to snap.
Right.
But yet when I saw Nick Diaz at the Invicta fight last February, that guy was smiles, taking pictures with everyone, saying high five or whatever.
Yeah.
I was like, man, that's like totally, like, he looks totally cool. Like, you would never think.
Certain social awkwardness, I think. But point being, though, with Nate, he was definitely motivated to come in and make a statement. And I think part of it is reclaiming his spot in the top 10 or top 5. Another part of it, frankly, is to prove haters and doubters, and I'm using that term, I'm guessing as he would apply to them, wrong. And maybe also an FU to the UFC, saying you treated me like this, and so FU, I'm going to come in and dominate and leave the proof in the pudding.
And you know what I think? He also kind of made a statement in regards to like he wants to kind of pick the fights instead of the UFC picking the fights for him. You know what I'm saying? So he wants to do he wants to fight the fights that he wants.
Right.
Not the
based
fights.
on big challenge or
that's
less
and
money.
I think that's the space that both of the brothers want to be at. So.
Yeah, I think a lot of time he's certainly follows in his brother's footsteps in many different ways. They're cut from the same cloth.
Yeah.
And as much as they're different in their own right, they're really very similar. The way that they approach their career, the way that they approach their training. In the chat room here, we got, of course, my man Joe Boza. Jermaine Lee is jumping in with us here. They're talking about the matches. Jermaine, regarding Cerrone, thinks it had nothing. He says it has nothing to do with Cerrone. It's just that Dos Anjos is that good. Did you see the Pettis fight? Totally fair point there.
Dominated him. So.
Yeah. Joe Boza is saying regarding the main event as well, I was looking forward to this fight because it would tell us what would happen to Conor McGregor. I'm sure Dana and Lorenzo weren't happy because in their world, Cowboy would have won. Cowboy versus McGregor. That is a nice one to promote. That would be fun. Let's see. Joe Boza thinks that Tony should get the next shot. He's won 7 in a row. Yeah, not the worst match in the world. I agree there. I'm not sure. I'd have to double check and see who his RDA fought against in the top 5. Like who else does he already have matches against in the top 5? And is Tony does Tony make sense in terms of that?
Well, we have a big I want to say Anthony Pettis versus Eddie Alvarez coming up soon.
Right.
So that's going to be a big.
I wouldn't wait for that though. I mean, I wouldn't wait to see because if Pettis wins that one, then you've got a rematch that I don't know I necessarily need to see right away,
But I mean, then you have Khabib, who still, you don't know when he's going to come back, and then you got Tony Ferguson at number 5. Obviously, I mean, there's really no one else really out there, unless maybe they sign Michael Chandler. But even Higgy's somebody like who would need to get step up since he hasn't had the best luck in the past few years. But what'd you guys think of Nate Diaz's post-fight interview?
Well, that as well, right? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm not gonna quote word for word. I'm gonna.
Why not?
On the internet, we can do this.
I will bleep it with my own self. So, in case you watch it on Fox and you don't know what he said, because pretty much they pretty much bleeped everything out. So here's, whatever.
Oh, that should be fun.
I mean, I'm not going to say the actual word, we're a PG semi-13 show. So, Conor McGregor, you're taking everything I work for, mother blanker. I'm going to fight your blanking ass. You know what the real fight money is me, not these clowns that you already punked at the press conference. First off, none of these have words. They could at least say this part. Don't no one want to see that. You beat them already. that's an easy fight. You want the real ish right here, hey, and another, and then of course Joe Rogan. So it was like, whoa, dude, we're on Fox.
Guys, I assure you, go to fightpass.com. The uncensored version is there. I've seen it a couple different places online as well.
I actually seen the uncensored one.
Yes. Yeah, the uncensored one is out there.
But the one that you showed me was the censored one today.
Right.
And I was like, wow.
Yeah, there wasn't even a bleep on Fox. I mean, I don't even know if they're going to, on replays, I don't know that you're even going to see it on replays because it just went silent. It was, I
don't think he's going to get interviewed ever again.
No, they'll keep interviewing him because that's so fun. But yeah, they may keep him off of Fox. But that was one of the best promos, guys, that certainly one of the best post-fight interviews in 2015. Mm-hmm. That's a memorable one because not only was it funny and it was Nate Diaz being Nate Diaz and cursing up a storm, but he's looking directly at the camera, he's talking mad shit, and he's talking directly at Conor McGregor, just like now as I'm trying to do, probably with certainly not as much pathos as Nate did, but that's the point. Like he was saying what he felt and he was very direct about it, and that was really, that's the kind of thing that fans love to eat up.
Do you think that they're legitimately calling out Conor McGregor for, just for the sake of, because he talks a lot of smack? Or do you think that, hey, the big money is in the I can't believe I'm actually saying this because he's so new to the company, so like 2 years, but the big money fight is now Conor McGregor. Mm-hmm. Like that is the Floyd Mayweather fight of MMA.
Yeah.
So do you think a lot of these guys are calling them out for that?
Depending on who's calling them out. Because I think when Nick does it or Nate does it, I think he just wants to fucking beat his ass.
Right.
But depending on who's calling him out, I think that's...
especially after that UFC Go Big conference, the press conference, where pretty much everybody was calling out Conor McGregor, and I guess you could say rightfully so after everything that Conor McGregor was saying.
Yeah.
But do you think they're mostly motivated by that big money fight, or they just want just another fight?
Well, it's a mix of two things because obviously yes, the money is there because Conor is a great seller, and there aren't any other great sellers, not to the same point, not to the proven extent that Conor has, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, he's also a good fighter. Let's not dismiss Conor's ability in the cage.
Mm-hmm.
That would be Conor versus Nate. I think is a fascinating combination. You've got two rangy guys that can clearly take punishment and keep going. Mm-hmm. Nate, I think, will have a proven track record.
Can you imagine the press conferences or like the way or the stare downs?
Yeah, this is a very good point. The stare down, just the weigh in, that in and of itself. Maybe you do that without ever culminating in a match, huh? Yeah. just book whatever B-level card you got or a regular fight night. By the way, we're gonna put Conor and Nate in a room together and just let the camera go, and that's gonna be it. I'll pay $9.99 a month for that. Huh?
I think that'd be fun.
But that's the thing. Nate wants fights that are going to challenge him. Mm-hmm. Of course, he wants big profile.
Did you see his comeback to everybody that's calling him out?
Connor's?
Yeah.
No.
He's on Instagram saying, "Line them up on their knees with their hands out. I want them to beg me."
To beg me.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
Okay.
With his Rolls Royce in the back.
Here's a guy who, if anything, I think Conor is allowed to say those things now,
right?
Because he's backed up everything that he said.
Yeah.
And have you seen that video? I saw on Soa Paleli's Facebook, where it has 7 years ago, Conor McGregor was like, "Oh hey,
oh
I want to be a UFC fighter
with all kinds of acne and
little zits on his face." And then you fast forward to him being in the cage, and then it goes a flashback to another fight where it's like, "Oh, I want to be on a." He's in a Vegas hotel, when he first started with UFC. Right. He's like, one day I'm going to own this city. Fast forward to last weekend where the whole Irish fans were crowding to Vegas. Right. And then a flashback to another. It's one day I want to be a champion. Boom. And then they show him as champion. And or one day, or
so
even
the point being that this has been a through line for him, the confidence.
And even not only that, but they'll show him talking about how he's going to beat Chad Mendes or Jose Aldo. And then boom, they fast forward to that.
He does have a knack for that.
So, if Conor can sit there and make those Instagram posts too, are you following him on Instagram?
I am not.
Okay, I was gonna say.
I am not.
I mean, there was a lot to say though.
You hardly need
For somebody
to.
who's not a Conor fan, you sure know a lot about his Instagram.
No. After all the fights, I kind of go into Facebook or whoever I need to go under, and I look up stuff and see what's going on, see what people are saying after the fights, or all that stuff, and that comes up. So that's why.
Okay.
As we all do. I mean, we're all looking to see what everyone else is
But
thinking.
I think for one thing, he's allowed to say those things because he's called and done everything that he's ever done.
Right.
So if he's gonna say, line him up.
He even called out the your favor with versus Ludwig.
Dwayne Ludwig?
Yeah, whole little thing with Dillashaw too. So.
Oh yeah.
Although he won't take that one. See, that's exactly the point. He won't take Uriah Faber in a match because he doesn't think that, at least as my understanding in following the Ultimate Fighter this season, he's doing Uriah Faber a favor in bringing him a big money match.
Oh.
Guys,
I think he's right.
Fighters are
I think he's right.
Agreed, yes.
Especially now as champion.
Uh-huh.
Like Faber's should be
Totally.
Yeah. Agreed.
But the point is, for any fighters that are watching this thing or anybody that wants to make a mark in the sport, the one way right now, if I was to build a fighter right now, and if he was to be in the stage of the UFC's level, my advice for any fighter trying to make their mark right now at this moment, the best way to beat Conor McGregor in a lot of ways is to take away Conor McGregor's power. And I don't mean in the cage physically. Be out Conor McGregor. Talk that shit. Talk that shit in your own tone. Don't just regurgitate what he says, but find your own voice and be louder and say more stuff than Conor does.
Can I just say that it goes to show just how much this guy's done in the short time that he's been around, that we've talked about Conor McGregor now for like almost half the show.
And he wasn't on the show.
But I do feel like this guy's become so big that almost any featherweight or lightweight that's in the top 10 that fights, whether it's against him or not, is going to be talking about Conor at some point. So kudos to Conor, dude. Seriously.
I think that's seriously an indication of when we talk about whose year was it? Top fighters in 2015.
But not just in one division, though. In two divisions. Now, I mean, because when we talked about Ronda, we only talked about that one division. Now, mind you, there was no 125 or 145 to go up or down.
Right.
But
see, I still think that this is just talk until at least middle of next year.
Until he actually fights at lightweight?
Yes.
But you still have lightweights calling him out. That's my point. My point is, even though he's never even had a fight at lightweight, there's still a bunch of these guys that are still calling him out. Rafael dos Anjos, going back to the main eventer, is saying that, feel free to come, but, you're not going to be in your zone.
There's always, obviously, at least two motivations for fighters. Either money or the championship. They want to call themselves the best. They want to prove to everybody else and to be able to say that they are the best. Or money. And sometimes, once in a while, it's the same thing. It's embodied in the same person. Certainly is in the case of Conor, at 145. That's the case with Ronda at 135, right? Not necessarily the case with Rafael dos Anjos. That's not going to be a money pay-per-view, Cerrone made it.
It will be if Conor's on the card.
Again, but that's Conor.
Yeah.
No, that's different. It's the money, but that's Conor drawing the money.
I mean, in some
not
ways,
Rafael dos Anjos,
no disrespect to dos Anjos or Cerrone, but I mean, I think there's a reason why this was on Fox. There's a reason why other fights are on Fight Pass. We all agree that it might not be able to be that great to sell on a pay-per-view.
Yeah, it's just the market value that you have to kind of.
But you gotta, and like
it's a title
Jay
match.
was saying,
Fox wants
you
title
got to
matches.
look at the book of McGregor too. Like, this guy was never on a Fox main event. He pretty much catapulted to pay-per-view main events, and rightfully so. He did that himself. No one else did that for him. So if you do want the big money and whatnot, maybe you got to read a book in the book of McGregor.
Yes, a page in the book of McGregor. Agreed.
I'm going to say the book in the McGregor, the page. I was like, yeah, whatever. You guys know what I mean. But I mean, we're going to move on to the heavyweight clash of last night. I guess you can say maybe years in the making. Alistair Overeem versus Junior Dos Santos. Now, this was the fight that was supposed to happen years ago, right? When Junior Dos Santos was the champion.
Right.
And then Alistair Overeem came in, and I guess there was some issues with his drug test, whatnot, or the steroid test.
I know
you might remember
I'd be
this.
hard-pressed to remember all the details of that, but there was a time when Dos Anjos was, I'm sorry, not Dos Anjos.
This was 2012.
Right.
After Overeem came in and beat Brock Lesnar, or retired Brock Lesnar, and Dos Santos had come or just finished Velasquez on, ironically, the first UFC on Fox show, and they were set to collide because obviously Overeem, coming from Strikeforce, was the heavyweight champion, who, you know, I guess didn't retire as champion there, but, you know, obviously they signed him, and still the big money fight. I maybe Joe Boza knows in the chat room, but yeah, I remember that was set for a clash. Then Overeem had to step down and then enter.
He sat out 2012 here, and then after that, when he came back, so he beat Brock Lesnar, and it was the end of 2011, and then his next fight was against Bigfoot Silva.
Yeah, so I mean,
gosh, that feels like it was just yesterday.
Yeah,
although
so
it was
going
2 years
back,
ago.
You know, according to Wikipedia,
Almost.
yeah, that fight was originally scheduled for May 26, 2012. But on April 4th, Overeem was revealed to have failed his pre-fight drug test. He had a 14-to-1 testosterone to TE ratio, which is way over the 6-to-1.
Yeah.
So of course there was this whole thing where, like, I think he was saying that.
Testosterone,
Of course, I'm not defending or accusing Overeem, but the whole, like, oh, my doctor this, prescription that, whatever.
That's when we started talking about horse meat. Is that right?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Alistair's alibi for how he got so big.
Pretty much.
Oh,
I mean,
really?
yeah. Here's the guy who used to fight at what, 185 or so. Maybe
Yeah, he was
195.
He was a very different boy back in the day.
205 in Pride. I remember
That was his lightest.
I don't know if it was his lightest, but
But if you do want to look it up, you know, of course, UFC Fight Pass. Look up Overeem from like 10 years ago. Because the new Overeem ate that guy.
Exactly.
I mean, this guy's insanely huge. But yeah, I guess you can say 3.5 years in the making. Maybe a little bit, maybe on the board of Liddell, Vanderlei Silva, and like, well, this fight would have been great 2 years ago. But still, regardless, you know, it's happened. I mean, what do you guys think about the fight?
A slow starter, I guess.
Yeah.
I agree.
No action. I think the most of the action was Junior Dos Santos trying to tap him for the start of the round. But yeah,
They were really cautious in the first round.
very.
Both guys, I think Mike Goldberg sold it as being a lot of respect between the two. But they were both very reticent to pull the trigger, frankly. I in my notes here, I ended up giving it to Overeem for the shot, for the single shot in the bloody nose that opened up on Junior Dos Santos. But in my notes, I say here, otherwise 9-9. I think both guys lost that one. There was not a lot of action in that first round. Yeah. Second round, though, he had a brief groin strike on Overeem. Didn't really make that much of a difference. And then here, Junior Dos Santos, you know, came in fine. It was a little bit more of the same, but a bit more action. Junior Dos Santos, though, coming alive with the combo to Overeem, but then he was able to escape and came back with an uppercut that just dropped Junior. And then followed up with three shots ground and pound. Dan Miragliotta was the referee on that. He jumped in and stopped the match pretty fast. It was the uppercut that drops Junior, and then Overeem gets 3 more shots on him. There was some talk about it being an early stoppage versus not. In my own opinion, in looking at it. Dos Santos, pardon me, falls backward. He definitely went limp there, but by the time he got to the ground, I saw from the camera angles that they covered, his eyes were on Overeem, and he took 3 shots unanswered. I think only one or two of them really hit the head. One of them kind of landed on the chest almost. I would have been okay if it kept going a little bit longer.
Just a little longer, yeah.
Yeah, and possibly Dos Santos would have survived it. I think he probably would have grabbed for a leg. Maybe Overeem would have shucked him off and continued. But that's one of those scenarios where you do err on the side of caution, and no slight against Miragliotta for deciding that. I mean, he certainly had a better vantage point of Dos Santos' eyes, and maybe he did see Dos Santos' eyes just glaze over. But it seemed like he wasn't completely out when he was on the ground. So I would have been okay with it going, but I don't think it was necessarily a bad thing that the match was stopped.
I really do think that JDS in some ways has lost something in him since he just got completely destroyed by Cain Velasquez the third time around. Even in his win against Stipe Miocic last year, he took a beating. Is this the same JDS that can we see maybe him get better in some ways, or do you think he won't be any time in the top 3 at all? Because he's been like number 2 top heavyweight for a while.
I think maybe it's number time 3. Off.
Yeah.
Time off seems to heal a lot of wounds. We saw that with Tamden McCrory on the undercard, who had a fantastic scrap against Josh Salmon. I think Josh Saman. Sorry, no, I know I screwed that. Salmon, I think it is. Tamden McCrory on the undercard, jumping to it, but beat Josh by triangle choke in round 3. That was a fantastic scrap. Now, Tamden McCrory is a guy that we haven't seen in a while. He was fighting in the UFC prior to UFC 100, and had I don't have his record up offhand, but kind of a mixed bag. Didn't really make a lot of waves, and then I believe was cut from the UFC. He went and fought elsewhere, but also I think took some years off. Was just training, but came back and had a fantastic fight.
He looked great. He looked great on the ground. It was just a lot of transitions, a lot of great, and with a great triangle finish on that.
He was busy from the ground and constantly threatening.
Yes. Always looking to finish. Always looking to finish.
Yeah. So I think that the point of this whole conversation, though, is that can be the case for Junior as well. I don't think that he's completely that he's done, that we've seen best days past. Yeah.
I mean, speaking of finishes too, kind of want to just go over briefly some of the prelim cards. You had Charles Oliveira with an impressive finish on Miles Jury, although he's probably going to fight at lightweight soon since he keeps missing weight at featherweight. Nate Marquardt, who great KO punch. What did you guys think of that one, real quick?
That didn't suck at all. Sorry, cutting.
I mean, he's going to be one of those guys.
A couple of things here. Nate, so. The first match, the first round, again, kind of similar to the Dos Santos Overeem match. Both guys pretty cautious. CB lands a hard one on Nate. I barely gave him the round 10-9, but then Nate comes out early and lands a right hook on CB, drops him, and we see Nate have great days and then some not great days. It's certainly I think it would have qualified for as a performance bonus, but didn't get it. But it was certainly an impressive performance, and could be another run for Nate.
I don't think so. But yeah, great night full of fights, of course. Of course, we're going to wrap it up. But before we go, I want to know briefly, real quick, favorite fight of the year so far.
Let me go to my notes here
I have to give it to the girls. They represented.
Oh,
is there a specific fight that you liked the most?
You know what? A big shocker. It wasn't my favorite fight, but just a big shocker was the Ronda fight with Holly.
Yeah, sure.
That was, I think that's one of the standouts of the whole year, just because you weren't ready for that. Nobody was ready for that.
Matches. Jeez, do I even have? Yeah. Robbie Lawler versus Rory McDonald. Here's a rundown. I've been keeping a running track, guys. I'm that nerd. Here's the ones to go back and look on Fight Pass. Robbie Lawler versus Rory McDonald. Tony Ferguson versus Josh Thompson. Cormier versus Gustafsson. Tony Ferguson from Edson Barbosa. Just 2 weeks ago. Speaking to the ladies, Rose Namajunas and Paige Van Zandt. Really engaging battle. Told a lot about both women. And one that people are going to forget that happened this year, Anderson Silva versus Nick Diaz.
Exactly. Yeah.
As much of a clusterfuck that was, guys, that's a fun match to watch.
And you know what? Another one was, going back to the girls, Joanna. Destroying.
Jessica Penne.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Carla.
We're getting the sound already here.
Yeah, I'm trying to get my vote for fight of the year, and you guys keep talking. Cormier Gustafsson.
And that's another one. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
All right, before we wrap up, before you give your Twitter handle, favorite fighter of the year, best fighter of the year.
Best fighter, Joanna, I think.
Yeah.
And your Twitter handle.
Oh, Lethal Laura, Instagram, 1 L in the middle.
Absolutely. I think Conor McGregor and Ronda were certainly the most important for the UFC. Tony Ferguson, I will say, had the best year.
He's a character, by the way.
If only he would call me back. Tony, I've been texting you. I've been calling. Let's talk about this, huh?
And I'm calling out
or
McGregor.
They can try you on your Twitter handle too, G10716.
Yep, he's got my number.
Okay. Well, I'm G Hermoza, favorite fighter of the year, Conor McGregor, or not even favorite, but I think he's just flat out the best fighter of the year. We're gonna be back in a few weeks covering UFC 195.
No, we're not going to be back till next year.
From Lawler and Condit, which, by the way, real quick, best fighter to watch is Sage Northcutt, who's already going to fight on the next Fox card on the main show, so good for him.
Dang.
So he's already going to fight in a couple months. Anyway, big 2016 coming up soon. Lawler Condit, Stipe Miocic Arlovsky, who probably is going to get the next title fight anyways, and yeah, good stuff. G Hermoza, Twitter, Instagram, Lethal Laura, J10716. We'll see you next year.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.